going to talk about drilling. We've cut all of our pieces. We have all the pieces laid out here that we're going to drill. And so we're going to walk through those steps with you. I'm going to show you the first little bit of each piece, and then I'll go ahead and drill these out, and you can follow along with your pieces if you're at that point. All we want to do is take the piece. This here is the steering bracket 1, and for the little parts, I like to put a piece of wood on the drill press and clamp it on so that I have a softer surface that's closer to the bit to work with, and I can get closer into the bit with the piece of wood and my piece of metal as well. So on the steering bracket 1, we need a 5/16 bit, which I've already got loaded into the press, and we're going to mark on the piece 1/4 of an inch down and right in the middle, which would be 1/2 inch for our hole with our silver Sharpie. Then we're going to take the drill bit punch and make a mark or a divot where we want that hole. Alright, then with the vice grips and our goggles, we're going to place this onto the wood and drill the hole. Now since we're drilling through metal, you want to take it nice and easy. And if you need to, use a little bit of oil. And we've got our piece made. So go ahead and do that for both of your pieces. And we'll move on to the next piece. The next piece that I'm going to work on will be the brake bracket, the disc brake bracket. Now, depending on what kind of brake you're going to use, your hole configuration might be a little bit different. For me, I need 2 holes that are 5/16 at 1 9/16 inch apart. So I'm going to once again measure in 1/2 inch. From the bottom, from the 90-degree cut, make a mark. Make a mark center, which would be 1/2 inch across. So now I've got a cross on my piece. And then I'm going to measure 1 9/16 between the 2 holes. Okay, once we've got those marked, we're going to take our punch, center up on the holes, and make our mark. Okay, make sure those are centered up good. We'll readjust our vice grips. The reason we're using our vice grips is because these pieces are so small that we don't have a whole lot of leverage. And you don't want to twist your wrist or hurt your hand if that metal gets loose from you. So make sure it's good and tight. And go ahead and drill your holes. that's one of the holes. You go ahead and drill your other one, and I'll go ahead and move along so we can work on. Okay, the next piece we're going to work on is the steering bracket. We're going to measure in 1/2 inch from the end on the long side, which is 1 5/8. Remember we cut 2 marks on this piece. One was 1 1/2 and one was 1 5/8. On the longer side, we want to measure in from the 90-degree cut 1/2 inch, make a mark, and then we're going to go another inch over and make another mark and drill it as well. So I've already made my marks. I'm going to go ahead and use the punch to make my divots. Okay, now that we've got those on, we're going to put on the goggles and drill our holes. Okay, so we've got 2 of those pieces. Do the exact same thing for both pieces. Drill both holes, measure them out, make sure to use the punch so your drill stays centered, and we'll have those done. The next part we're going to go to is the R-1190, and it is just going to be a bracket that your seat will bolt to. And once again, it's going to have the 5/16 hole. I'm going to remove this wood now, so we're getting into a little bit bigger pieces. You may want to wear gloves for this, or you may want to clamp it down if you're not comfortable holding it. Whatever's most comfortable for you, but be sure and do everything safely. If you're using a hand drill, you may want to clamp it to the table to drill it. Just make sure you're drilling straight up and down so that your holes line up when you go to put your seat on. So I'm just going to set that up there. Bring my plate up a little bit. Make sure it's centered. And then on the 1190, it's 11 inches long. We want this to be right in the middle. So we're going to measure 5.5 inches in. Then we're going to measure 1/2 inch across, make our cross. Once again, we'll punch it. Set it up on the press. I'm going to go ahead and clamp this one down because I'm kind of at a weird angle here. If you do use a clamp, you won't have to worry so much about holding the piece and letting it get away from you. So I would suggest clamping it if you have the clamps available. piece drilled there. The reason why we're pre-drilling these is so that once it's welded, if you were to drill the holes after it's welded, all those little pieces of metal that I just dumped out will stay inside your frame, and you'll hear them when you move the frame around. It's just a cleaner way of doing it. Okay, the next piece that we're gonna drill is the 1290. The 1290 is our seat back, and this hole is for our seat cushion. So we're gonna drill it 7 inches from the bottom. So when you go to weld this piece, you need to make sure and remember where the bottom is in accordance to your 7 inches. So I'm going to mark 7 inches here. And then we're going to mark our 1/2 inch on the sideways. Do our center punch. Line it up there. Clamp it on, and we're ready to drill. There's all the metal that would have gone inside of our frame. So we have 2 pieces of those 1290s. So go ahead and do the same. Mark 7 inches up from one side, drill your hole, and you'll have those 2 all set. Okay, the last one we're going to work on, it's got a couple different holes in it. It's part number 2730. And you'll notice that the 2730 has a 30-degree cut at one end and a 90-degree cut at the other. So what we want to do is we're going to measure from the front side, which is the 90, toward the back to get the distances for our holes. So we're going to go 24 inches from the front of this and make a mark. And then it's our 1/2 inch mark for the side to side. Make our cross. And then we're going to do our punch. Center that up. Make sure that's good and lined up after you clamp it, because sometimes when you clamp it, it moves a little bit. So we've got this marked, clamped, and we're making sure that our 30-degree is slanting this way. You don't want a side slant to either side, or I guess up and down doesn't matter, but just make sure it's not to the side, because this is, again, one of our seat bolt holes. So we want it to be on the top. So go ahead and do your drill. Okay, we're going to do that same hole on both pieces. However, with one of the pieces, we're going to put some brake control line holes so that after the card is assembled, we can insert eye bolts in there to keep the brake control rod right next to your frame. So we're going to go ahead and make some marks for those on this piece, and then the other piece you just leave with the one single seat hole in it. So with this one, we're going to drill a 3/16 hole. So we're going to switch out bits here. You may want to readjust your plate if you're using a drill press. Get it up a little closer. Okay, so we've got our hole on the top. These are going to be on the side. So we're going to lay it on its side now, and we're going to measure 7.5 inches from the front, the 90-degree cut side. 7.5 inches, and we're going to measure 25.5 inches to the back. And we're going to measure our 1/2 inch to the side so that our hole is centered. And then we'll make those two drills, those two holes, and we will be done. I'm not going to clamp this because it's a big enough piece for me to have leverage on. Okay, so we got both of those drilled. So now we've got one hole in the back, 24 inches from the front, the 90-degree angle, and we've got two holes in the side that are different size at 3/16. One's 7.5 inches, one's 25.5 inches. And that completes this piece. Then the other piece that matches it will only have one hole to match this one right here. And that's it for our drilling. Let's start welding it together.